There are a ton of resources out there about pairing your wine with food, but what about the resource that no one asked for? Pairing your wine with your gaming experience. As an amateur wine enthusiast and a new gamer, I thought I'd do the logical thing and speak definitively on both subjects. Put aside the energy drink and pick up a glass of wine. Let's get started. First off, an easy one. Narrative-heavy games, as the name implies, put story first, sometimes even ahead of technical gameplay. When it's done well, it's way more than just a visual novel and tells the story using gameplay mechanics. An easy example is What Remains of Edith Finch. When you're playing these types of games, definitely go for a red which makes you think. Look for something with tons of layers to parse out while you make your way through the bottle. And yes, the whole bottle. Maybe some essence of mushrooms in the forest floor. Bonus points if you've got tannins which grip you like the narrative. One such varietal is Pinot Noir. It's grown all over the world, with likely the most famous area being Burgundy, France. For our purposes today, I recommend the Pinot Noirs of the Pacific Northwest. It's got layers of spice, berries, earthiness, and sometimes even flowers or tea. Let it unfold as you work your way through the story. Another good varietal for this genre, particularly if you've got a mystery on your hands, is Malbec. Most of the world's Malbec comes from Argentina, where you can find examples which are big and plummy. It's far from a one-note wine. You can also find layers of smoke and tobacco and may even be able to taste chocolate. That being said, its tannins can be aggressive, so you'll probably want to decant it before drinking. And by the way, no need for a special decanter. I just pour the wine into a pitcher or even just pour a generous glass of wine and leave it for about half an hour or so, if I can wait that long. Japanese role-playing games are linear games in which you progress through the story and level up your character or party using turn-based combat. Examples of this genre include Pokemon, Dragon Quest, or the Final Fantasy games. Because you need to gain experience points in order to learn new moves and increase your hit point total so that you could progress, grinding is endemic to this genre. Often, if you just run in guns a-blazing, you'll find yourself outclassed by the enemy. Therefore, you need to spend time fighting lower level enemies until you level up enough, so it can be quite repetitive. To take a real life example, I've been trying to play through Earthbound for 8 months now. So for JRPGs, I'm not going to recommend that you pick up something super stereotypical like sake, which is a rice wine. First of all, that's not what we're doing here. I'm going to introduce you to things that you haven't thought of, perhaps. But second of all, with ABV clocking in at like 15 to 20%, you're going to get way too hammered on sake when you're playing a time sink like a JRPG. So I'm going to recommend that you pick up a piquette. Piquette isn't strictly wine. It's a drink made from adding water to wine pomace, which are the grapes that are left over after the pressing is done. Historically, it was drunk by farmers and peasants, and if you go even further back, it was provided to commoners and slaves in the Roman and Greek empires. Now, you can have the pleasure of paying just as much as or more for piquette than regular wine. But that being said, the stuff is delicious. It tastes like a funky cross between wine and beer. It's usually a little effervescent, and since the ABV clocks in around 4 to 10%, it makes for a super crushable picnic drink, giving you just the right refreshment you need to crush your 400th slime. Now, if you insist on drinking sake, which, I love as well, just want to flag a couple things for you. So, sake has a huge variety in the styles, the tastes, everything that you can experience, just like with wine. But you might not find that kind of variety when you go to your local liquor store. I think they're probably just stocking the big brands from Japan, plus they're sitting on a shelf for maybe months. Sake is often meant to be drunk fresh, so if you do want to pick up a sake to accompany your JRPG adventures, I'm going to recommend that you try to seek out a local brewery and pick it up right from them, because it'll taste so much better than what you've had at your local sushi joint. It's also really easy to make at home, which I'm going to make a video on soon, so stay tuned. Farming sims are pretty self-explanatory. In these games, you simulate farm life by growing crops, tending to livestock, and harvesting or crafting different types of resources. Many of these games often have a relationship component where you can form friendships with villagers or even romance them. Some examples include Stardew Valley, My Life at Portia, and Story of Seasons. Now, you're thinking that since we're playing a farmer here, this should also be Piquet, right? No. Try out one of these two varietals instead. Carignan or Maréchal Foch. They're both stereotyped as unprestigious or rustic grapes. Given that in these games you've left the hustle and bustle of city life behind in order to fix up the family farm and get to know these salt-of-the-earth locals, I think these are the perfect varietals to drink while playing these games. Foch is a heartier grape which can be found in cooler New World regions. It's jammy on the palate with a decent amount of acidity. Because its tannins typically don't hit so hard, it's one of the first wines that I got into as I began my wine drinking journey. For this reason, Foch will always have a special place in my heart. Farming your virtual crops while being fueled with big Foch energy is a recipe for success. Carignan, on the other hand, isn't really a hardy plant, but it makes the list because you may be able to find some examples with barnyard on the nose, which is obviously on theme. Yes, barnyard aromas are a real thing, and if you like natural wine like I do, not only are you familiar with it, but you love it, as off-putting as it sounds. Brettanomyces, or Brett, can cause the smell. It's a naturally occurring yeast, which is often used in funky beers. So if you like Belgian beers like those made by Cantillon or Dryfonteinen, odds are you've had a beer conditioned by or fermented with Brett. When it's added to beer and wine, it adds just a little bit extra character. In addition to the essence of the farmyard, you may also encounter stewed fruit, herbaceous notes, and some spiciness in this highly acidic and tannic wine. While Carignan is often used in blending, more and more wineries are putting this humble grape in the spotlight. You'll find most luck with southern French wineries, as it's not so common in North America. Now we're moving on to sports games like Madden or Chell. These games are pretty accessible and widespread, even among those who aren't too into gaming. For a product with mass appeal, my mind immediately jumped to a certain type of wine. While you can of course rosé and slay all day when playing these games, I'm going to recommend an Australian Shiraz here. It's bold, it's fruit forward, and can have some spice and a touch of meatiness to it. You're not going to have the strong tannins which are off-putting for newer drinkers. Its drinkability makes it popular with the masses, which is not intended as a cheap shot because I'm part of the masses too. Of course, if you're outside of North America, let's just replace Madden with FIFA and grab a Syrah from Côte d'Aron in France instead of the Shiraz. It's actually the same grape, but tastes different in that it's earthier and can have more mineral characteristics. Like Australian Shiraz, it still has those dark berry flavors and some meatiness. It's actually well known for having aromas of bacon fat. I hear there's a subtle difference between American and European football too, so I'm sure you guys can fill me in on that. You can also find Syrah in the Rhone Valley's GSM blend. That stands for Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvèdre. Red fruit is often more prominent in GSM than Syrah's black fruit, but you'll still see Syrah's spiciness come through. Now finally, while I'm not going to touch the debate around what technically counts as a Souls-like game, let's just say I want to discuss Soulsborne games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro, where combat is absolutely punishing and you die over and over again. So this one's an easy one. I'm less concerned about the specific tannic properties and the different aromas and the bouquet. You basically need to make sure that whatever you're drinking, you've got a box of it so that you can numb the pain of having your ass kicked over and over again. I know that the world of wine can be really intimidating to break into, not unlike a few gaming communities. I'll be working really hard doing my homework to get a few more recommendations to you guys. I'll also be making specific recommendations in the future, so keep an eye out for that. Big thanks to Wine Folly. I've been using their print guide extensively, but they also have a lot of free resources on their website, which I'll link below in the description. Thanks for watching, and cheers!